Today our topic is about balancing automation with human smarts. And what I'm going to present you here today is a result of 2 research studies that I have completed. That's me. With my colleague Ibrahim Mohammed at Hong Kong Polytechnic University. And actually, we have collaborated with HSMAI for data collection. So we interviewed some of you, maybe not in this room, but some members of the organization. And after that, we rolled out a survey where we collected data from 30 countries and 172 revenue executives that work with revenue management systems and do overrides. So the keyword of this class is overrides. Like, why do we override? How do we override? How often do we override? And what is really happening as we override? Okay, so override is the keyword. So let's jump in. So yesterday I talked a little bit about humans versus systems, right? And actually it shouldn't be versus, it should be human and system dynamic. So we are now at a place where revenue management system produces a recommendation and revenue executive has to make a decision, right? Are we going to accept the recommendation or do we have reasons not to? And what are those reasons? Are those reasons justifiable, right? So revenue management being a hybrid space, we are trying to align ourselves with algorithmic outputs, and we are human, so we are flawed as humans, right? So when I did this study, I looked at the theory a little bit, what is going on when we think in our brain. Right, so decision-making occurs under bounded rationality. So what does this mean? We are unfortunately not rational and logical all the time. By definition, right, being human. And this is called bounded rationality. And this is shaped by what we call dual processing. So when we need to make a decision, we make this decision in 2 different ways. Slow thinking, fast thinking. Slow thinking, we are really logical, think about probabilities, expected outcomes. We are rational and logical. And the other one is fast decision making. We don't have much time. We have many decisions to make. We have to make a quick decision and move on. And decisions in life goes through, the combination of fast thinking and slow thinking. So now think of yourself dealing with revenue management systems recommendation on a daily basis, maybe many times during the day. Do you think you are going through fast decision making or slow decision making? Come on, audience, help me here. Slow, really? You have the time to do it slow. So anyway, so I will tell you what the theory says, and then you will tell me whether that is true in application. So it looks like if we can go slow and think thoroughly, we can make better decisions. But we don't have that time and capacity all the time, and sometimes we have to make fast decisions. And it is when we make these fast decisions, things might occur that are not logical, that are not rational. So bringing this in the context of overrides. So our research, interviews, and the surveys found that everybody overrides. Okay, there's no question about it. Nobody takes, it can be Ideas, Duetto, EasyRMS, whoever, doesn't matter. Everybody overrides the system. But here's the bigger problem. No one understands how the system is arriving its decision. Because this is like competitive information, right? So revenue management system providers are not really telling you how the system algorithm works. So when you are overriding, do you even know what you are overriding? Because you don't know how the system arrives its decision, right? So this is very complex thing to deal with from a user's perspective. The high stakes of override decisions. So this is not my research, but a research done around like 2021 by professors in United States. They say that 40% of revenue management recommendations are overridden. Then we wanted to understand what drives these decisions, right? Why are people overriding? And most importantly, and this is the most difficult question to answer, and I don't want to spoil it, but there is still not a clear answer to this question. How do they affect performance? Do you know how your overrides affect your company's performance? Because it's, I don't want to say impossible, but extremely difficult to calculate such a thing, right? And revenue management service providers don't have this computation either. But we will talk about that. So where do these biases come from? Again, I'm going to take you a little bit to research and literature. So they are related to these things called heuristics and biases. So yes, you can read this, but just to quickly tell you, heuristics are mental shortcuts. Just, very quick thinking, something you are used to, something you are very experienced about. You are using mental shortcuts to make decisions. But how can a heuristic become a bias? So think of heuristics as a tool, and if you use this tool too much, or if you misuse it, it can become a bias. And just to give you a non-revenue management example for a heuristic, let's say you're out of laundry detergent, you're in the grocery store, you don't need to go through shelf by shelf, study the brands, the prices, or the volume. You will just go and take the laundry detergent you have always been using, right? So you are using that heuristic, that mental shortcut. There are around 19 different types of biases and heuristics. We looked at all of these, and I'm going to present you here today the most widely used ones in this interaction happening between revenue management system and revenue executives. But why do we override system recommendations? There are many reasons, okay? Let's take a look at the most popular ones. Organizational related issues. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit further, but now, I want you to think about, does your organization have any rules around overrides? Do they tell you, you can override this, you cannot override that, or you can override by this much, but not that much? So sometimes and in some organizations, you are not allowed to override at all. In some organizations, you are 100% free to override, right? So what is going on within your organization in relation to overrides? Next one is data skepticism. Because you don't understand exactly what data is going into the revenue management system and how the system is processing this information, right? You don't necessarily believe in data, you believe in yourself more than the data. Local insight. So let's say you have been working in Singapore for 10 plus years, 15 plus years, 20 plus years. You know this market so well, you have the local insight. But revenue management system doesn't have local insight. And also, I have heard things like this from people say, oh, I'm a resort hotel, revenue management system doesn't work for me. Or I'm in this location, revenue management system doesn't work for me. That's why I override. There's an urgency in relation to this because you are very busy, you need to make so many decisions, and you just see a number, you don't agree, and then you input the number that you think is more appropriate, right? And it may also be related to things in like system gaps in how your revenue management decision-making process is working. So having said that, not all overrides are bad, okay? Sometimes, I hope majority of the time, you might be correct to do the override. But I think what I want you to understand in this session is to differentiate and maybe to recognize yourself when you are biased, as you decide to do that override decision. Okay, so not all overrides are bad, but many are biased. So a minute to talk about hotel KPIs in relation to overrides. This part was very interesting. Again, we ask people, do you have any KPIs in relation to overrides? Some hotels, like I said, they were very strict. Some hotels allowed only input overrides, but not output overrides. I'm going to explain the differentiation to you in a minute. Some hotels had restrictions on the direction, like you could revise the rate 5%, but above 5%, it wasn't okay to override. And sometimes there were rules around overriding the rate up versus down. And also there were many hotels that didn't do any control on overrides at all. We had a person that we interviewed with, very high up person. So this person told us she was working with a company that had so many restrictions on overrides. She left that company and went to another organization where she was free to do whatever she wanted to do. She was that frustrated with the rules around the overrides. So what do I mean, input versus output override? So input override, you are changing data inputs, the data inputs that go into the system so that system can make a recommendation, right? So input override still lets the algorithm work, right? Because you change the data inputs, and revenue management system algorithm is still working to make a recommendation. So you are not bypassing the system. For that reason, this is viewed as more sustainable and strategic in comparison to output override. Output override, you are changing system's recommendation, right? So in a way, you are completely bypassing the system's recommendation. You are changing the rate to whatever rate you think is correct. And this one is considered more of a short-term fix, and our research showed us that this is usually driven by overconfidence of the revenue executive. So now I will walk you through 4 scenarios, and I am sure in comparison to what you have to deal with at work, these are very simple, but just to, go through them and think about them. So first scenario is a holiday weekend override. So your revenue management system recommends $215 for an upcoming public holiday weekend. Last year, hotel priced at $249 and sold out. So revenue manager overrides $245, stating, this weekend always fills. Is this a good override or a bad override? You are not talking, but you are smiling. So I heard one answer, so I move forward. So the likely bias here is anchoring. After I go through the examples, I will show you all the biases, but just bear with me a couple of minutes here. So what is the trigger of this bias? It is past performance reliance and also performance pressure. So how can we justify this override, right? Is this justifiable? So one answer was like bad. It depends on how you interpret it. But I said here maybe it may be partially valid because you are thinking historical data may help, but also the current market demand, market context, market situation should be considered. And how can you mitigate this bias? You need to look at current live demand, things like ComStat data, maybe also reflect on whether the override is evidence-based or habitual. Next example. Scenario 2, shoulder night intuition. Revenue management system recommends $180 due to weak demand. Manager overrides it to $210, saying, I know this market. Revenue management system always misses shoulder nights. Can you guess what type of bias this might be? Overconfidence, right? Knowing the local market so well. Oh, I know this market so well. The revenue management system doesn't. Right? So the trigger is local knowledge dominance and system mistrust, and this is weak because you are basing this on perception rather than data. Third one, revenue management system recommends 15% price drop for the coming week. So this is different. Prices are decreasing this time. And the manager sees a few new bookings and instead raises the rate by 5%, believing the demand is turning. What type of bias this might be? This is what we call loss aversion. Okay, when the rate goes down, this is a very bad thing in revenue management, right? Everybody wants the rates up. But what if rates need to go down this time? So this is the fear of loss, actually. So this is combination of both confirmation bias and loss aversion. And confirmation bias because you see little bit of evidence of things getting better, and this is all the evidence you need not to drop the rate. Okay, that makes it confirmation bias. So trigger is the selective attention to confirming cues and fear of perceived failure. So justification is poor because it is driven by bias and not data, right? And mitigation around this is to require multiple indicators before rejecting revenue management system recommendation. And this is the last scenario. GM requests higher pricing due to brand positioning. The manager overrides revenue management system, raises the rate, but does not log this decision. So here we have pressure coming from other parties outside revenue department, right? So this one is external influence, again, and no feedback loop. There is stakeholder pressure, and there is lack of override review protocol. So this is also something I will discuss with you, the importance of tracking these override decisions. But, you know, I was making a point of this yesterday, and one of industry leaders attending this conference told me that like one of their staff, for example, overrides in a year 600 times. So if somebody is overriding 600 times the system, you cannot keep log of that, right? So maybe it doesn't work for everybody if you're in an organization where everybody is overriding all the time. So this is politically required, it's operationally risky. I think very obvious. So what are these biases? So now I'm going to show you the definition of these biases, the most popular biases, not all 19 of them. I think I have about 7 that I will go through here. Confirmation bias. So I have the definition on top, and I have an example quote from my research. Inclination to evaluate a recommendation against one's belief rather than the evidence that you have. So if your system recommends, for example, $5,000 a night, you must override it because you know it is not realistic or acceptable. Another very popular bias is the anchoring bias. Propensity to base a decision on a predetermined value and failing to sufficiently adjust towards true value. And this one came a lot in our research. Think about your budget. Think about the KPIs you have. You have those things in mind. You are going to get your bonus according to that budget or that KPI, right? So you are trying to get there. And that's the logic. That's why it is called anchoring. You have an anchor in mind, and you are trying to move towards that anchor. That might be a good decision or might not be a good decision, right? And here is the example. After adjusting the demand, I look at the optimized price by the system to see if it is where I want it to be. So this is input override. So first the person tries input override. And if it is still not where I want it to be, then I override it directly. So if that doesn't work, the person then completely overrides the rate. This is output override. Another very popular bias is overconfidence bias. This is also called optimism bias. So this is the tendency to overestimate one's likelihood of achieving a positive outcome and underestimate the likelihood of realizing a negative outcome. And this is, I think, like illustrates the point really well. I have more confidence in myself to make the right output over right decision than a wrong decision. And we haven't tested this, but my observation is that this happens largely to the people with a lot of experience. If you are a very experienced revenue executive in a particular regional area, you know this market so well. And we talked so much about generational differences yesterday. It looked like, in our study, younger people had less overconfidence problem, but older, more experienced generations had more of an overconfidence issue. But we haven't tested for that. And again, this bias is also called optimism bias. Another interesting one is the peer effect bias. What is that? Predisposition to be affected by peers' behavior. Our peers here are our competitors. Okay? Although the system's recommendation may be mathematically accurate, I tend to go with my competitive set average if there is a marked deviation. Again, aligning yourself with the competition. It might be the right decision or it may not be, right? So this is called peer effect bias. Outcome bias. Tendency to be influenced by the outcome of a previous decision that may be independent of the current decision. When overriding the system's recommendation, I try to remember outcomes of my previous decisions and be guided by them. But previous decisions happen in completely different circumstances compared to now, right? There is no like economic ceteris paribus, everything is staying the same and the situation repeats itself. This never happens, right? So in this particular instance, it may be the right decision, but is it? We are not sure. And loss aversion bias. So this one is preferring to avoid losses than acquiring corresponding gains. And again, this is something that is irrational, but we do all the time. So here's an example. And I think this example is very representative of Asia as a culture. Like, we like being in the middle. We don't want to be extremely low, extremely high. Middle is the comfortable place to be. We always play it safe, somewhere in the middle, to minimize risk and avoid losses. This is, I think, the last bias, default or status quo bias. Preference for allowing the status quo to prevail rather than changing it. So when the system gives us a recommended rate, we follow it because it is also one of our KPIs. So now, I would like to discuss a little bit about what we found in our second research, where we rolled out 100, we actually sent surveys to 500 people, but we got 172 replies. I'm going to beg here one more time, if you receive a survey from me, please complete it, okay? And I will present your findings to you for the next HSMAI. So anyway, so we had data from 30 different countries in the world, and all these people were revenue management system users, and they all did overrides. So two of the most popular biases that we identified were anchoring and overconfidence, and they had completely different effects on performance. So anchoring improves performance only if overrides are effective. And effectiveness of the overrides is a very difficult topic. I will address it as best as I can in a minute. And overconfidence has a direct negative effect. So overconfidence doesn't come across as a good thing. So let's talk about anchoring. So again, what exactly is it? You are trying to adjust the recommendation towards a known reference point. It can be budget, it can be KPI, that's your anchor, and you are trying to bring back the recommendation to that. So we found that this is mostly happening due to two reasons. First reason is you are trying to guide the system. So you don't believe system recommendation is accurate, but at the same time, you don't want to bypass system's logic. You still want system to work through its algorithm. So you believe in revenue management system learning capabilities. So anchoring mostly happened through input override. So you change one of the data points that go into the system, and you want the recommendation to be something similar to your reference point, your anchor, your budget, or your KPI. Or you might be doing it to comply with company policies. Again, whatever the expectation is from you. And anchoring, in our research, if it was used properly, was proven to be effective. And the bad one is overconfidence, okay? And I call this the costly intuition trap. So one of the things that we understood and we were happy about was that many people see revenue management systems as their coworkers. And when we look at human intelligence versus revenue management system intelligence, we are not comparable, right? We don't have the same processing capability. You cannot upload that many data points to us, and we cannot analyze them. And, you know, we, like the jargon of this conference, actually across this corridor, there's another AI conference, AI and Human Smarts. So they are discussing the same thing that we do today. One of the issue was with overconfident revenue managers was that instead of seeing revenue management system as a coworker, they saw revenue management system as a rival. You know, they said, I am the revenue director. This is just a system. I'm better than that system. So in that mindset, I'm very experienced, I know this market, and this system doesn't, so I know better than the system. So this is one of the sources of overconfidence, right? And we should be very careful about that. So why do these people that do overrides because of overconfidence, they don't trust the system because, again, one thing is you are believing you know better, and the other part is lack of transparency. So this thing, you know, seeing revenue management systems as a black box came up so many times. And we interviewed also revenue management system providers, and we interviewed consultants as well that advise hotels about revenue management systems. And the discussion on this point was very controversial. Some revenue executives told us, we really want to know how the system is processing, forecasting data, and producing an outcome. If we can understand, at least to some extent, then we will understand what we are overriding. And also they told us, you know, these revenue management system providers have local reps, right? Time to time you ask questions about the system, etc. Those people are not technical people, they are salespeople. So when you ask technical questions about the system and how forecasting works, they can't answer. So that brings frustration. Right? And another point of view on this was that revenue management systems are getting so complicated. So we talk about AI, we talk about like large data processing models. So the systems are getting more complicated, but our intelligence as humans and our information processing capabilities are staying the same. So as these systems are getting more and more complicated, some people told us that revenue executives will not be capable to understand such complex modeling, right? So what is the solution here? So one of the solutions that we recommended in our research was to use explainable AI. So you can bring explainable AI, and it can explain very complex concepts in a very easy way to us, you know, humans. So this is what we recommended, but I don't know if revenue management system providers will take on it or not. So overconfidence can harm the performance, especially when the override effectiveness is low. So I'm going to check my time. Okay, we are very good with time. So in terms of addressing these biases, I want to make it very clear that these biases are not just personal, right? You are not biased just yourself driving this organization. These things are happening because of how your organization is built and structured, right? So they are embedded in role expectations, system design, and performance culture. So I'm happy to see some of you are taking photos of this. Please bring it back to your companies and show them and send them to me if they don't agree with you. I will talk to them. Because addressing these overrides, biases requires a systematic solution. As just a revenue executive yourself, you cannot do anything. You need your organization's support behind you. So let's take a minute to talk about the mediator, override effectiveness. To me, this is the deepest rabbit hole. How do we know if our override is effective? Do you have an answer for this? When you override, how do you know that override is effective? No, right? There is no mechanism to check what the outcome would be if you didn't override, if you kept the system recommendation, versus you have the actual, you know what happened after your override, but you don't know what would happen if you didn't override. Revenue management system does not calculate that, right? So how did we address this in our research? In our survey, we wanted to understand, are the overrides effective? And how did this affect the performance afterwards? So override effectiveness is the mechanism that determines whether the override helps or hurts. So how did we measure that? We measured that by asking people, which wasn't the best way to do it, but there was no better way to do it. So we measured it like this. Revenue executives perceived improvement of system pitfalls and output accuracy through their manual intervention to the system. And the question to ask here is, are we capturing and learning from overrides or just bypassing system logic? I think the real danger is bypassing the system logic. I mean, your company spends so much money on this revenue management system, right? And these systems are not stupid. But then overrides are also required too. You know, system cannot be fully automated at all, right? Definitely needs your input and your intervention. But next time you do overrides, think about this. Are we capturing or learning anything from these overrides, or we just completely mistrust the system and bypassing its logic? So, override decision self-check. For those of you that deal with overrides on a daily basis, ask these questions. What specific reason do I have for overriding? Why am I overriding? You know, am I trying to teach the system something, or am I trying to prove that I'm better than the system? And have I validated my reasoning with new data, right? Can I back this override reason with data? Does it make sense? And would I be comfortable justifying this override, maybe not to GM, to somebody else within your team? So what I want you to take away from this session, I think it is important to recognize your biases, right, from your own decision-making process. So maybe next time you are doing an override, ask yourself, am I biased? Do I fit in any of these boxes that Dr. Başak talked about? And also think about override effectiveness. Although we cannot measure this yet, how do you think your override decision is affecting your company's performance? And if you are not a company or an executive that is doing hundreds of overrides in a year, I think it is important to have an override log so that you can check yourself why you are overriding. Is there a consistent reason of why overrides are happening? I think this is also good to bring back to your team to discuss with them. Are there particular patterns in your overriding? And involve your team. And remember, use revenue management system as a partner, not a rival. And out of this research, I have published 2 research articles. So if you liked what you heard today, but you want to read more, you can reach me through my email or through LinkedIn, and I can send my research to you. So that will be it from me. Thank you very much. Thank you.
A question about the 40% overrides. Is that 40% of the days, or was that 40% of the hotels did override sometimes?
40% of systems recommendations.
Okay.
So how many ever times, you know, you are doing the forecast and get the recommendation?
So is you didn't say this as a conclusion, but is the conclusion that revenue managers are misusing their revenue management systems?
Yes and no. Yes and no. Because not all overriding reasons are bad, right? Some of them are good. But the point is to be able to differentiate good from bad. I think that's the point. And what makes it extremely challenging are those, you know, organizational and external sort of, you know, pressures, political things that are around you. So that makes it very difficult. And also what is making very difficult is many people have no clue what the revenue director is doing, right? So in some of these organizations, people were clueless. Override? How many times override? No, our company has nothing. Nobody talks about override KPIs. So they think, you know, these revenue people, wizards, are in these rooms and doing magic, you know. So it's a very challenging topic, and I myself was fascinated when I looked into this. I never thought we would find all these things. It's like a rabbit hole, really. More you dig into it, more things you find. But the biggest challenge is the calculation of override effectiveness. Nothing is there. And that's why we can't exactly measure what is good, what is bad. Thank you for the question.
From a completely different angle, because I think we covered. From a different angle, because I think we covered everything. But from a psychological point of view, the thing missing out of your research right at the end is, if you're looking at science, is the ability for a person to self-reflect and judge themselves objectively to having bias. Right?
You know, it's, to me, what was very interesting is, you know, those quotes I show you as a representative of the biases, people were talking about them as so natural, you know, this is like what we do, this is, everybody does this.
That's
so
right.
Nobody looked at these things as biases. Yeah. They looked at them as, you know, oh, I know this market so well, I am very experienced, I am very careful about my budget, my KPIs, so they didn't have that perspective at all, actually, when we had interviews with them.
So that for them to be able to look at themselves completely objectively and realize, oh my God, I've got a bias. I am rivaling my system to prove that my own self-worth. That's a very difficult, that's a whole new
that's the point.
discussion.
Oh, also, you know, very, very interesting, like in one of the interviews, the person told us, I have to override, otherwise, why am I hired? Because otherwise, system is, you know, system is going to do everything. I have to prove my existence by overriding the system to justify that I still have a job, you know.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So, but it's amazing research when you realize that some decision making is not based on data or things that make sense. It's based on our own interpretation of a situation.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. I think recognizing that. If you recognize that today, I think that's already one step forward.
Yeah, big step forward. So, yeah. Okay. Very good. Amazing presentation. Thank you.